Hi, I'm Andrea Anthony, and you're watching Eat, Drink, and Bake with Andrea. Today, I have some great light seafood recipes. We're going to start off with Clams Pocilipo, and today I'm using Colavita brand Premium Selection olive oil, which is wonderful. I'll talk a little more about it. And then we're going on to a poached halibut with walnut pesto and our dessert lemon cake squares with a tangy lemon glaze. So let's get started. So I want to talk a little bit about our clams. The clams, what we're using today, are little neck clams. This is about the size of them. Now, if we were to go a little bit bigger, they would be top necks. Little necks or top necks are good for this recipe, not cherry stones, because the larger you get, the tougher the clam is. But before we even get to that, we really have to clean these well. Sometimes they will have residual sand. I'm going to show you a little trick to get some of the sand out of the clams and make sure there's no grit. You're going to need one of these little babies. It's a vegetable, or it's a vegetable scrubber, but you can use it for clams. So we need something with a nice bristle on that so we can get to those clams. And really, it's just a motion like this. So these have actually been scrubbed already. I'm going to walk over to the sink and show you my little secret. So what we're going to do is we're going to get some cold water on our clams. Okay, now you need about a gallon of water on your clams in a big bowl, and we're using about a half a cup of sea salt. We're going to sprinkle that on. You're going to let your water cover the clams. Okay, give them a little shake. Now remember, these have been scrubbed already, so we're in the soaking process now. So we're going to fill this up to the top, and we're going to let them soak for about 30 minutes. Now you need to do this process about 3 times. So you want to start your clams much earlier than when you're ready to prepare them. So let's let these soak a little bit and we'll be right back. So what we have here is a colander and a large bowl. You want your colander to fit in the bowl, and we're going to put that in the sink for a minute. We've been soaking our clams, so now we're going to pour them into the colander, and I want to check the water in the bowl to make sure there's no grit or extra sand. So let's do that. Okay, so at that point, you're going to pick it up, put it in the empty bowl, and then you're going to check your water out. All right, now I'm going to pour it here so we can see. And all that's really left in the bowl now is some of that salt. There's no grit. Now we've done this 3 times, so by the 3rd time you should be good to go, but you always want to check the water because you don't want grit in your recipe. And it looks like we're ready, so we're going to go back to the island and get the recipe started. So let's talk about our ingredients. We have some chopped tomatoes, we have some olive oil, and we're going to saute some garlic in there, and some Vidalia onions, and then we have a little white wine, and our herbs are a little bit of fresh basil, and we have fresh chopped parsley, and oregano is a big part of this dish. So let's go over to the stove, and we're going to get our sauce going, and we're going to throw our clams in, and we'll have it well on the way. So you need a tall pot. Now, I don't like too much surface area because we want our broth to come up, which will help to cook the clams. So on this particular recipe, you don't want a large pot that's that has a large circumference. We want a tall pot with a smaller circumference, and that's this. All right, so let's get our extra virgin olive oil going. We know it's hot enough. You can hear that little sizzle, and in goes our garlic. Okay, you can also throw the onions in at this point. And we're going to give that a little mix. And let's brown it for a couple of minutes, and then we'll be ready for the rest of our recipe. Okay, so we can see here that we're browning nicely. I think we're just about ready for our tomatoes. All right, so in goes our chopped tomatoes. Let's give that a mix. And I'm throwing my white wine in there. You know, when you cook with white wine, you want to choose a wine, or any wine for that matter, that you really like. It does make a difference in the recipe. So whatever wine, and this is a dry white, whatever wine you choose, I happen to pick a Chardonnay, it should be something that you would drink on its own. We're going to let this simmer a little bit, let some flavors combine here, and then we're going to add some herbs. Just give this about a minute or two and we'll be right back. Okay, we're ready for our basil, fresh chopped basil, and we have our parsley and oregano, dried oregano, a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. I'm going to lower that flame and we're going to simmer that for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we're going to throw the clams in. Be right back. Okay, time for our clams. Okay, we scrub them. They're nice and clean, and in they go. Okay, now once they're in, I'm going to give them a stir. What we're trying to do now is coat them with the sauce. Okay, so we have the sauce on our clams, and now the pot gets covered. We're going to put that flame up a bit higher, and we're going to cook the clams until they're open. Now let me tell you a little secret. Some recipes call for steaming the clams on the side, making the sauce, and then throwing them back in. Clams are tricky. I don't like that procedure because it's easy to overcook the clams and they can get rubbery very easily. These clams are actually cooking in the sauce. So I would say about 5 minutes into the cooking process, we're going to check them again and we're going to toss them because the weight of the clams will make it hard for some of them to open. So with this recipe, it's very important that you keep tossing the clams, and while doing so, you're tossing that sauce around the clams. And there's just enough broth to add really great flavor, but that's why it's so important to make sure that those clams are super clean. So let's let these cook a little bit, and we're going to check them again and give them another toss. Okay, let's give it a look. Yes, we are ready. Okay, so we're going to move our clams over, we're going to put them in our bowl, and we're going to pour that beautiful broth right on top of them. Okay, so let's get our clams in the bowl. You need something like this or a slotted spoon to get them out. Now, you want to be a little careful because you're going to lose some of the clams. They're going to come out in the cooking process. They'll be in your broth, but that's okay. So we're going to kind of carefully get these out. Okay. So beautiful. That broth, amazing. You know, you don't really need to add clam broth to this. The broth from the clams as it merges with the tomatoes is just enough. So no extra clam broth needed. Okay, I'm going to get all these in there. And nice to have a big bowl like this. Yeah, I see a couple came out, but I see those. I see the clams are right on top. Okay. Let me have one more. Okay, so once you have them in the bowl, then you're going to pour your broth over the top. Okay, and that's the best part. And of course, you will need some crispy hot bread for dipping. And when I set my table, I always use spoons because this broth, it is just wonderful and it's so much a part of the dish that you shouldn't waste any. So between your bread and your spoon, you have to eat all the broth. And there it is, Clams Pocilipo. So we're ready to start our poached halibut. Today I'm using the Colavita brand extra virgin olive oil, and it's the California olive oil. It's very fruity and it adds just a nice flavor to our dish. Doesn't fight it, nice tones. We're going to start with this today. So we're going to start our poached halibut, and what we're going to do is, well, what we've done, we have some lemon zest in our saucepan. Okay, so we've washed our lemons and we've used our zester and we have all the zest off, and now we are going to use the lemon juice from the 2 lemons we've zested. Okay. Okay, so we're just going to squeeze that into the pan, just like so. Okay. Ah, that beautiful aroma of lemons adds a nice touch to our dish. Okay, we have basically, we're poaching in a very mild broth, and I like to poach because it keeps everything nice and moist. So we have our chicken broth, low sodium, and we're using a little bit of white wine, and we have basil, a little bit of salt, and our lemon. Lemon's a big part of this, just to impart a bit of lemon flavor, but very mild. So we have our lemon in there, we have some lemon zest, and we're gonna add our chicken broth, and we have our white wine, a dry white wine, and some fresh basil. That's really it. So what I want to do is we're going to move this over to the stove. We'll get our seafood poaching over here, and then while that's happening, we're going to start to make our pesto sauce, which is a walnut pesto. Let's just talk about these ingredients. We have fresh basil, we have our walnuts, we're going to put a little lemon and lime juice into our pesto, and we have, of course, our olive oil, and we have some fresh garlic, and we're using Pecorino Romano cheese and also a Parmesan cheese. 2 types of cheese in there, adds lovely flavor. So let's go to the stove, we'll get our fish poaching, and then we'll come back and we'll do our pesto. So we have our halibut ready to go, but first we're going to start with our broth. Now we have all of our ingredients in our saucepan. We're going to bring this to a boil, and then we're going to bring it down and reduce it and let it simmer for about 10 minutes. So let's bring that up and we'll be right back. So we've come to a boil now. We're going to give that a little bit of a stir, and I'm going to reduce my flame, and we're going to let that simmer for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back and we're going to put our halibut in. Okay, so we've been simmering, flavors are combined, now it's time to add our halibut. Okay, so now you want a big enough pan so that we have some space in between. We're using our saucepan because we want the broth to encircle just about halfway up. It shouldn't cover your fish. Okay. Now the trick to poaching is a very low flame. If you were to research this, you would know that it's 140 degrees you're supposed to keep your broth at. Never worked out for me, okay? So what you have to do is always seems higher. So what I can tell you is keep it as low as possible, and you just have to give it some time. Now the other thing we're going to do is we're going to put foil loosely over the top. Not a lid, but just some foil so that we have some steam escaping. Okay, so let's let that cook. It's going to take a while. I would say, depending upon the thickness of your halibut, it could take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, give or take. So that's why we're going to check it frequently. Let's let it start going, and then we'll come back to the stove and we'll take a peek. So now time for our pesto, the best part of the dish. Okay, let's put our fresh basil right in there. And this is going to release all those oils and some great flavor by pulverizing it. So you really need a food processor for this, okay? So we're gonna get our basil in. Now we're adding our olive oil, extra virgin. Olive oil is a big part of the flavor of this dish, so you want nice olive oil. And it needs a little bit of lime and lemon juice. And that adds a little bit of a flavor component to that. And we have 2 types of cheese. You can add it all together, which is great. Okay, you just throw it all in there. We have our Parmesan. My garlic, on a rough chop over there. I don't put the whole cloves in because I have found sometimes you get some, larger cloves at the end. So just give it a rough cut before you put that in. And then, of course, we have our walnuts. Put some pepper in, not really adding salt because there's a lot of salt in the cheese. That we can sort of adjust at the end. So no salt for now. Okay, so let's get this rolling. Okay, I'm going to use your spatula, kind of move that down a bit. we're looking good. It's so fragrant. The combination of those flavors is just wonderful. And it, you know, with the mild fish, this is really the flavor component. So everything we're doing so far is very mild, doesn't really add much flavor to the fish. This is about the flavor. So we're gonna get this out of the bowl. Now, the thing is with pesto, it's really nice to let it sit for a while and let all of those flavors combine. And you could let it sit at room temperature. So we're gonna get this in our bowl right here. And while we have our halibut poaching, we're just gonna let it sit at room temperature. And this is the kind of thing you can do in the morning, you know, several hours in the afternoon before you're ready to serve. So the pesto is ready. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful addition to this dish. Okay. All right, good. So let me clean up a little bit and then we're gonna go take a little peek at our halibut. Be right back. Okay, we're taking a peek here. We're not quite there, but you can see that it's turning white. That's the indicator that we're cooking nicely. But see how this is a little fleshy over here? We know that isn't done, okay? In fact, I'm gonna move that around a little bit just to get that in that hotter section. You know, sometimes you have to move your pan around. You can see that this section is not as hot as the rest, not cooking evenly. So you can adjust your pan on the heat. And we're just taking a peek. Not quite there. We're gonna let this go a few more minutes and we'll be right back. So let's take a peek. All right, now the way to test is we wanna make sure that it's not translucent. It shouldn't look fleshy. So you can take a little knife and we're gonna just make a little indent here and peek in the middle. And it's looking good. It should be opaque, not translucent and fleshy. So, looks like we're good. I'm gonna get this out of the pan. We're gonna plate it with our wonderful pesto on top, and I'm gonna show you just what a great dish this is. We'll be right back. So, we have our halibut, which is all finished. It's plated, and now time for the pesto. But I mentioned testing for salt. So what you wanna do is just give it a little bit of a taste. I think it needs a little bit more salt. So we're gonna go gradually, just a little bit. And again, we use salt and pepper shakers at the table, for personal preference, but this needed just a little. And now we're just gonna spoon it on. And we will have extra. So when you're finished, you can put the rest on your table. And incidentally, if you have leftover pesto, of course you can make pasta. So it's good for dipping bread. It's really, I absolutely love pesto sauce. I've even stirred it in rice. It's wonderful. Okay, so we have our pesto, and we're gonna garnish with some thinly sliced lemon. And that completes our dish. We have our poached halibut with our fresh pesto garnished with a little bit of lemon. And now, speaking of lemon, let's get on to dessert. Lemon cake squares with a tangy lemon glaze. So now we're ready for the best part of the meal, and that's our lemon cake. All right, well, first of all, we have our oven is preheating at 350 degrees. We're using a 9x13 baking dish, which we've greased, and it's all ready to be filled. So we'll start with the cake part of our recipe, and then we're gonna move on to the glaze. So first of all, we're using some white sugar, and we're gonna cream in our butter. Okay, so let's add that. We're gonna combine that until the butter and the sugar are nice and smooth, and that's called creaming. I'm gonna increase the speed a little bit. And now time to scrape the bowl. I'm gonna give that one more spin. Very good. Now we're gonna add eggs, but about one at a time. And with each addition of our eggs, we're gonna mix a bit. So we have our one egg, And we'll add another one. We're trying to get this nice and light. Now, this is our baking powder. We're going to add that with our pre-sifted all-purpose flour. Use a whisk, just give it a little tossing over here, combining together. And we're going to put a little bit of that into our mixture. Start it very slowly, and we'll pick up a little speed here. And we're going to add a little more. I'm going to do this gradually. Really important for this batter to be mixed thoroughly. So we just want to make sure that we're mixing gradually as we add our ingredients. Okay, I think we can throw the rest of this in, and then we're going to scrape the sides of our bowl. Very good. Give it a mix, and then we'll scrape. Really slowly. Okay. And we'll give that a nice scraping on the side. And our batter is almost done. Okay. So this is what your batter should look like. Let me hold this up so we get a good glance at this. No lumps. The batter is nice, smooth, well combined, and creamy. So we're going to move right over here, and into our baking pan we go, 9 by 13. It's such a light cake. It's such a perfect ending to a seafood meal. Love lemon, and lemon goes so well with seafood. So I like to end a lot of my seafood meals with lemon cake. And you're just going to spread your batter out so it's even. Sometimes I'll give that little trick. Get something soft and then just give it a little tap. And that will sort of even everything out in your dish. Okay, so I'm going to get cleaned up. We're going to put that in the oven, 350 degrees, and it bakes for about 50 to 60 minutes, but we're going to check it about halfway through. If we need to, we're going to put a piece of foil on the top. If you see it browning too much, you can always add some foil, and then we'll finish off the baking process. But let's get it started. Okay, let's give a little look here. Yeah, I can see it's turning brown. This won't happen in every oven. My oven, it happens. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cover that for the end of the process, okay? And some ovens, if it's not cooking evenly, you might have to turn your pan. Should mention that. If you notice that part of it is cooking at a different rate, ovens are different, just give your pan a 180-degree turn so that we distribute the heat evenly. All right, so let's let this cook for about another 30 minutes, and then we're going to check it out. So it's been about 55 minutes, and this is looking good. Okay. But just to be sure, we're going to give it the test. Toothpick, right in the middle. And we just want to make sure that it comes out clean, which it has. So we know the cake is done, but it has to cool completely before we put our glaze on. So I'm going to move it over on a rack. We're going to let this cool, and while it's cooling, we'll start our glaze. So we're ready for our lemon glaze. Now let me just point out the powdered sugar. See how smooth that is? Very smooth. This has been pre-sifted. Okay, we don't want lumps in the powdered sugar or you'll have lumps in your glaze. So just make sure it's nice and smooth, no lumps, sifted. Now we have our fresh lemon juice. So easy, it's only 4 ingredients. We have lemon juice, a little bit of lemon extract, and we have our zest of lemon. Just one point to mention, when you're zesting your lemon, you just want to make sure you get the yellow part only, and lemon zesters work great. And you just want to be careful that there's no white in there because that pithy part will impart some bitterness. So just that part of the lemon. Okay, now we're going to just dribble that in. All right. Now it looks like a lot of sugar, like we would get a lot of frosting, but you really don't because this is going to shrink down. Okay, I'm just going to put my little bit of extract. It just gives a little burst of flavor. And mainly, you're just going to mix it around. Okay, we're going to combine it. Best way to do this is with a spatula. You're just going to keep folding it over. You don't really need a mixer for this. I mean, you can use one, but really not necessary. It really works nicely, just kind of tossing it together. And I'll show you when the whisk comes in. See, this is what we're coming down to now. Now, at this point, we can add our zest. Okay, now I'm going to use my whisk at the very end. Once our ingredients are folded together, then we're just going to give it a whisk like this, okay? And all I'm doing is just kind of making sure that everything is combined nicely. And that's really it. That's your glaze. So as soon as the cake is completely cooled, then it's ready for the glaze. We're going to clean up and we'll check our cake and we'll get glazing. Cake is nice and cool and we are ready to go. And this is just so easy. I'm just going to pile it right on there. Yum, such a good glaze. Very tangy, works really well with this cake. And we're just gonna smooth that along, right on top. Now the thing about this is you do wanna let it sit a little bit just to kind of settle in. We'll let this sit a little bit and we'll be back in a few minutes. So here's our light seafood feast. We started out with Clams Pocilipo, we moved on to a poached halibut with some walnut pesto, and we ended up with lemon cake with a zesty lemon icing. So with today's light seafood feast, I'm pairing it with Fit Vine Sauvignon Blanc wine. Wonderful wine, it's light tasting, crisp, and it goes so well with our dish. And for me, what I love most, 114 calories in 5 ounces and less than 3 grams of carbs. For me, that means more lemon cake. Cheers. You've been watching Eat, Drink, and Bake with Andrea. Please follow me on social media at Eat, Drink, and Bake. And for more information about my spice line, you can visit my website, eatdrinkandbake.com. And remember, it's all about great food, step-by-step recipes, and enjoying time with friends and family. Cheers, until next time.